My name is David Thorpe and I'm the Special Consultant on Sustainable Cities Collective, the foremost web space for urban leaders everywhere. The collaborative economy is a new buzzword about trends that are changing the way that people interact with each other and do business, and it's claimed that it is a more sustainable model than the traditional one. So here to talk about this is Jeremiah Owyang, the chief catalyst and founder of Crowd Companies, which focuses on how large companies tap the collaborative economy. He also writes on how web technologies such as social media and interactive marketing impact upon the relevance of corporations to customers. His blog, Web Strategy, attracts huge attention, and Jeremiah is frequently quoted in journals such as the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and USA Today. Greetings, Jeremiah.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, first of all, perhaps you can begin by explaining to everybody how you define the collaborative economy.
Thank you. The collaborative economy is a new economic model where creation, funding, access, and ownership are shared not just between corporations and cities, but also with the people themselves.
Okay, so how does it work in practice, and how does it make cities more sustainable?
Sure. Maybe let's just give some examples. Some of the trends that we're seeing out there, and one of the graphics that we can maybe show up on the video, is the collaborative economy honeycomb. And this shows how there's six major verticals or industries where people are creating their own things or they're sharing things with each other. For example, there's physical goods. People are sharing bikes, physical appliances in their house, clothes, and they're even making their own products. So that's goods. The second one is food. People are sharing creation of food, and we're seeing people share their own food. Even homes are turning into restaurants with websites like Cookening or Feastly. The third one is services. People are sharing their time, both for business and personal. They run errands for each other, reducing waste as people are already going to the store. And we're also seeing transportation be shared. Cars, people are lending each other cars or giving each other rides. Number 5 out of 6 is people are sharing their space. Companies with excess office space, they're sharing it with other businesses. And people are sharing their homes, like websites like Airbnb. And lastly is money. People are creating their own types of money, like the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and they're sharing money in Lending Club instead of going to a bank, and they're even funding each other, which is called crowdfunding, including the development of new real estate in cities. So I gave you 6 examples, different verticals: goods, services, food, transportation, space, and money, how people are creating their own things, and they're sharing it because they're enabled by new technologies. So that's an example. So the question you asked is, how does that make the world more sustainable? Well, it provides a couple of nuances. One of them is that people are sharing resources. So instead of owning a garage filled with woodworking equipment, you can go to Tech Shop, which is a makerspace, and lots of people share that same equipment, and you can work with other makers, and you're more efficient, and you're innovating. 2, it also means that we're seeing people tap into idle resources. And because there's mobile devices, you can find cars that want to give you rides on Uber, BlaBlaCar, Halo, Lyft, and beyond. People that have these cars and they want to use high utilization. So we're seeing a decrease in the need for car ownership. People are saving time. So there you go. People are sharing resources. People are sharing their time and other things, which makes cities more efficient.
Okay, I can understand how sharing things is a good thing. It's more sustainable to share than it is to everybody to own their own thing. How do you ensure, though, that it's also inclusive? What if I don't have a smartphone and I don't have this technology? Can I still partake in the collaborative economy?
You absolutely can partake, but you're limited to only the geographic location that you can see or that you have connections to. And mobile devices enable people to be good neighbors to strangers because it has Facebook Connect on it, and you can find other things around you using these apps. So you will be more effective in sharing or the making behaviors if you have smartphones. Most people in urban areas may have a smartphone. I don't have data on that, but this is actually definitely being driven by technology. One last thing I wanted to add on to this. The collaborative economy also means people are making their own goods, the maker movement. People are becoming like their own companies. But it also means they repair things. So we're seeing maker shops emerge in urban areas where you can bring broken appliances or bicycles and people will fix them in exchange for trade or other things. So it means we're not throwing things away into landfills. We're starting to repair things as well.
Can you give examples of cities where this is happening?
The city who claims to be the leader in the space is Seoul in South Korea. They want to be the sharing capital of the world. And their density and the type of culture that they have, you see a high degree of this. San Francisco has clearly been one of the leaders in the space, and we've even seen negotiations between some of the startups like Airbnb, Uber, and Lyft with city government, including new forms of taxes being passed on to the city. Portland has also been very active in New York, and we see a lot of these movements happening in London and Paris as well.
I can understand how it would happen in Seoul because there was already a very long tradition of people sharing things with each other well before the advent of smart technology. So do you think it's a crucial ingredient of this taking hold that there's already a culture offline, so to speak?
Well, cities by design are actually enabled for the sharing behavior. It's something that's human, and it's why people come together to share roads and other common infrastructure like parks. So this is not something that's uncommon to city areas. But it's not limited to city areas as well. We still see rural areas that are known for sharing. In the Midwest United States, the maker movement is something they did before the Industrial Revolution, and people help each other at farms. So while I understand the focus is on cities where we will see the highest degree of it because of the density and smart devices and population increase, and most people will be living in mega cities by 2050, when you look at the core of this, these are human behaviors. This is why we come together as collectives, is to reduce the cost or risk of an individual and have net gain by groups of people coming together.
So imagine that I am an urban leader, I'm a mayor or leader of a department in a city, and I'm concerned with the provision of services or utilities, or even healthcare services, for example. How can I use this new trend to help me do my job better?
One of the things we're seeing is cities are enabling the people to help use the excess space in ways that they can make them more efficient. So they're starting to turn over some of the city planning to the people. For example, I work in a space called 5M, which is 5th and Mission in San Francisco. And the property manager, they're not from the city, realized that the future is mixed space, media, business, and life all coming together. So there's a number of projects there where it's a lot of co-working spots and people, and new innovation is coming out of there. For example, Square, that device used in mobile with your credit card swipes, that came out of that neighborhood. Indiegogo, a crowdfunding platform, is all there. So we're seeing cities are starting to recognize areas for sharing and innovation. Another example is a property manager had a space in a seedy area, and they allowed a group called Free Space to take that location and turn it into a community collective, almost like a library/park where anybody could use it. And this brought more foot traffic into this underutilized location, which will increase its value, and therefore they'll find a permanent place that they can rent it out. One other example is we're seeing cities offer parking spots to become parklets. I'm sure you're familiar with that term, where the community can help design, feed, and care for new plants and replace it instead of having a parking spot, discouraging more cars and encouraging cultural phenomena of people coming together. So companies can create platforms where the people can share and create and find other services. I mean, the classic thing that we're seeing is the bike sharing, where cities are enabling city resources to help people to share resources and reduce other forms. So create a platform for the people to make and share on top of it.
So would you say that open data is one such platform where cities make available data that they have for hackers and others to use to create things that they find useful within a city?
Yeah, that's absolutely tied to this movement. Open data, open communications, and then the media aspect and the data aspect is the online version. But what we're seeing is this is replicating in the physical world, where people are creating their own things and sharing their own things. So that there's a mixture. There is a number of links I've been seeing, and Peter Hirschberg has been tracking hacking cities. So he might be a candidate for an interview. And so people are starting to create structures and do their own city planning together. So hacking cities is a trend that we're starting to see.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed that you've written is that the collaborative economy is a powerful movement that shifts power away from corporations. And yet, in another article, you've given an example of Amex and and Uber joining forces. Now, Google has a stake in Uber, and Uber, as you say, is on track perhaps to be as big as Amazon. So this seems like consolidation at an extreme level, rather than helping local people shop locally.
Well, I wouldn't say they're apart. They're all tied. So when you look carefully, Uber is a logistics network at a local level, which will help people to share. And so Uber doesn't own any of the logistics assets that are actually delivering people or goods. The people own that. So it's a business model that we haven't really seen. It's like a franchise where the people are actually creating those, or that own the cars and are driving things. So it's hard to tell. Well, without the people, sites like Uber can't win. So there's actually three groups that we need to think about in this. And there's three Ps. The first one is platforms, like Uber.com or Airbnb.com. The second is the providers. Those are the Airbnb hosts or the drivers in Lyft, Uber, and Halo. And three, there's the partakers, people who are getting services from those three things. All three have to work or the whole system fails.
Yes, but I still think that this, when the web started, then it seemed as though it was open for anybody to partake. And what we've seen is a consolidation with a few players like Facebook and Google and so on dominating the entire internet. Do you think that this is another platform to enable the same thing to continue?
This is not socialism. This is capitalism.
Sure, but it's a collaborative
really
economy. Collaboration is about sharing, and this was another question that I have: is how does competition fit into the model? So those with the most to start with, who've got the capital to play, like American Express, they've got a lot to lose if somebody else takes over. They're going to buy into this picture and make sure that they stay on top. So where does that leave the people who don't have that power, who don't have the startups, people like that?
There's a number of constituents in this market. I've actually mapped out over 10 different groups that have a stake in this, from government to the three Ps that I talked about, to NGOs, to corporations, to regulators, to even advocates for the space. So I forgot, and VCs. And each group, these different 9 to 10 different groups, has a different stake and a different mission and a different purpose. They all want something different towards common mission. So there's no question. So we're seeing the rise of unions form of Uber drivers in order to combat the platforms. We're seeing the people who were displaced, taxi drivers throughout London, Paris, coming together to fight the movement. We're seeing brands come into the place. Some are lobbying against, some are partnering with the platforms. We're seeing regulators confused, going different directions, partnering or stopping it. So I don't think you can summarize this movement as, is this the little person versus the big group? Because it's hard to tell where that fits in the cycle. The one thing that's clear is people are now empowered to connect to each other. So we're seeing the providers come together. For example, the freelancers union out of New York is a group of people that they have their own tax, they're fighting for their own types of taxes. They have 401k benefits. And these are all people who do these types of things as providers just full time. They're forming groups. Peers.org, a group out of San Francisco, is an advocacy group for the people who are sharing. So we're seeing collectives and collections coming together that represent the people in the stake as other groups are around. So I hope I answered. It's not black and white. You can't just say it's the people versus the man. This is a very complicated space. Even the VCs and the tech platforms like Uber and Airbnb may be in conflict because the VCs expect a return in 5 to 10 years. But the platforms may not want to do that because that means forced capitalization of their marketplace, which makes it turn into one giant marketing machine. So it's a very complicated space. I can't pin it black or white. Maybe I'm in too deep, but there's a lot going on.
No, it does sound tremendously exciting and very dynamic and fast-changing, as you say. And I'm sure we're going to keep an eye on this and see how it pans out in the next few years. And also be interesting to see whether any city authorities actually do take it on in any active sense as well. Jeremiah, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for being here on Sustainable Cities Collective, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.